Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Elspeth. Let's dive in. That is a great example because and it really does. I just want to unpack that just for a moment. It's just that idea that there's a strong trend. Now, I suspect that you tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect the people who made that product had probably been working in and around plant-based foods for a long time. But what they had done was, if you were approaching it afresh, you go, okay, well, obviously there's a big interest in plant-based foods. We all eat mayonnaise, or many people do.
And actually, just thinking about it now, Impossible and Beyond, what were the first products that they came to market with? Burgers. Because everyone understands burgers, burgers. If they had come out with I don't know, hearty meatballs on a skewer, people would be like, what do I want that for? They took something that was very, very familiar to people and made a plant-based version of it. And I think, those are the kind of things that I think really drive volume. And then once you kind of cover your bases, then you sort of have permission from this consumer to go even further. So Just Mayo then went on to launch Chipotle mayo and kimchi mayo and all these wild and wacky flavors because they'd kind of earned the confidence of consumers to try something new. President's Choice is a great brand that does the same thing because there's so much confidence in the brand. Their consumers are more willing to kind of go along for the adventure. They might buy something that they've never heard of before because they've bought all these other products that have delivered really great value and really great taste for their family. And so they're kind of willing to go on the adventure. But they have the power of a big brand behind them. If you are, new to the market and unknown, you're probably better to go with something that's really quite familiar with a little bit of a twist on it, to kind of get people to come along and kind of follow your brand.
Interesting. The other interesting thing about those brands that you referenced was that their strategy was to actually not go after plant-based consumers. They were actually looking to go, as I understand it, they were looking to target consumers who wanted to simply reduce their consumption of meat, which meant that they had to go to market with something that a meat eater would say, wow, this is amazingly good. Not a plant-based eater who'd go, this is a step up from the often not very good products you buy. So I just love that idea that they really raised the stakes saying, you know what, we're going to go to the heartland of something that is so beloved and we're going to give you a reason to switch.
They were doing something incredibly innovative, arguably one of the most important innovations in food in the last sort of 20 years, but they did it with a mindset of appealing to as many consumers as possible.
Yeah, interesting. So one of the things I'm blown away by is the fact that apparently there are something like 30,000 new products introduced every year, and about 80% of them or more fail. Now, if so many of those products are being developed by major companies, and those major companies have got market intelligence, distribution, all of that, how is it that so many of those products fail? I just don't understand that equation when you've got everything laid out in front of you. What's happening in the culture that make those products that's contributing to those failures?
Is that true? Like the bulk of them?
I'm not saying there are. I'm not saying they're all coming from large companies, but many of them are.
Large corporations are so mindful about the challenges to getting into market and the success rate or the stick rate of their products, that it can greatly shade their product development. So, on the one hand, I'm saying, if you're a food entrepreneur, try not to be too wild and wacky. Try to think about broad appeals so you can get your business off the ground. Conversely, larger food brands tend to focus so much on mass appeal that their innovations can fall a little bit flat, because they're not that interesting, right? Because they aren't willing to take a risk. They're so risk averse that then their innovations can sort of lack relevance to people. It's like, I'll try to think of an example, but it's like, here's a new granola now with extra large raisins. It's like people love raisins. It's like, okay, like who cares?
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like they can sometimes
Right.
just overthink and consumer panel and consumer panel and consumer panel so much that you take an idea and you just kind of water it down so much that their brand new exciting innovation just isn't so innovative anymore. But to your question around why do products fail? I mean, there's lots of reasons, and I think I spoke about consistency, and I think inconsistency is a huge part of it, and everyone is trying to get to market so quickly now. I mean, I spent years at Loblaws. We were always looking at our process, like how do we get to market faster? The other retailers are getting to market faster. How do we get faster? It was always something that we were looking at. And now companies, there were always these sort of like rules of product development. Like you have to create something in a lab, then you have to test it in a factory, then you do a very small commercial run, and then you scale up that commercial run. And now things are moving so quickly that all kinds of steps are being passed over because people make a calculation of risk. It's like, well, I could take more time to get to market, but I risk someone beating me there. So I'd rather be first to market and kind of fix things as I go. And so I think a lot of challenges are happening because the process is getting to be so quick. Not with the large companies, because they tend to follow their process and don't take those risks, but entrepreneurs certainly do. And then that can lead to product that's not consistent. And I think that's an issue for consumers. And I think, distribution can be an issue for consumers, and success or not, like in terms of getting into the right number of stores and then having that product be ordered. Like it's one thing to have a buyer willing to list your product in their set. It's another thing to make sure that the stores actually put that product on the shelf day in and day out, right? Because if the product is not there and the consumer doesn't pick it up, that's where it all happens, right? In the store. So I think distribution can play a role. And I think people really need to be mindful about the value equation. Are you delivering a product that people are interested in and that the price is, matches up to what the consumer expects the product to be? I think that's another place that people can fall down, especially in the new world of, most food companies don't produce their own products. They now they're kind of following the private label model, right? It used to be branded products had their own manufacturing. Retailers with their private label programs piggybacked on those manufacturers and made their own products. For the most part now, brands, I haven't met with a brand that has their own manufacturing probably in 3 years. Everything is co-packed. And if you think about, everyone along the line needs to make their part of the profit. The manufacturer does, the brand does, the distributor does, the retailer does, and so cost is a big challenge in this model when you don't own manufacturing. And I think then if the value equation is not there for consumers, they aren't going to pick it up. And back to the category manager, he's trying to manage his shelf, or she's trying to manage her department and deliver the most profitability. And so retailers are becoming very savvy about, if you don't move a certain number of units per week, then you're out, because everyone's knocking on your door to show you a new product that could replace it and sell more. So I think all of those things kind of swirl together to create this perfect storm of sort of churn of new products that don't, some of them don't last beyond sort of 2 years.
This is the interesting thing that I've often thought about. And it's, again, similar to you. I work with clients, and, it's difficult to say to them, guys, let's not get too excited by standing in this boardroom celebrating what we're doing. We have to put it in the context of the marketplace. Like, the thing that blew my mind, which I don't think companies recognize enough, and there's a couple of dimensions to this. So first of all, average grocery store has got about 45,000 items in it. The average household buys less than 1% of available products. So it's about 0.7% of available products. And the reality is that we are creatures of habit. So if you think that most people pushing a basket in a grocery store are reaching for a very, very limited selection of brands, and then there's all these new products coming in, you've got to think, like, how do you get on their radar to even be considered as part of the process? As you suggested earlier, it's not just getting considered, getting the basket once, it's becoming part of a routine for somebody. And that involves, not just thinking about selling in, but it's like selling out. How are you going to get people to actually go and look for you?
One of the exercises I go through with my clients, they get a product development consultant, so they want a pipeline of innovation and they want all these new products. And I say, well, how many products do you think you can launch in a calendar year? I'm like, 20 products, easy. We can do 20. Can you develop 20 products? I'm like, I can develop as many products as you want, but can you actually sell that many products? Like it's not the easy part is product development, but it's often easier than the sell. So you've got these new products. How do you get them in the hands of as many retailers as possible? How do you get them on the shelf? How do you get the attention of the consumer? Like it ends up that the number of products companies can launch is much lower, not based on the capacity of product development or ideas or of being able to find manufacturers, but of their ability to actually sell the product and market it to consumers so that the products can live and not be delisted. That's sort of the linchpin of like how many products a company can launch, not how big their R&D department is.
I know. It's like, I don't think I've ever heard a retailer say, you know what, we love this product so much, we're going to add an extra 6 inches to our shelves just to accommodate it. It's like they're not building more space at the back. So, but at the same time, and this is what drives me freaking crazy, is we know that consumers embrace the new. We know because, like, if you just look at the direct-to-consumer model industry now and how disruptive it's been to very traditional brands, we know consumers are basically looking for different forms of value. I think that's the way to put it. Because value is, the same for less, or even, better for less. The reality is that they are willing to try different things. But, you go into a grocery store.
I remember once you showed me a PowerPoint slide, and it was like a photo of a grocery store in the 1950s, like the center of, we call it center of store, the aisles where cereal is. And then a photo of a supermarket from like 2020. And it's like, spot the difference. It's like, it's exactly the same. And your point to me at the time was, and I loved it, I've used it lots of times, thanks. But it's like, what else in our lives has stayed the same like that? What else? Everything else has changed, right? It's exactly the same.
Has stayed that static. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really interested in this. And it's not going to be particularly helpful for an entrepreneur, but I think it is an interesting dimension to think about, which is you've got a consumer who's, what I say to people is, you got to go into this knowing people's money is spent and their attention is gone. So at the same time, it's a great time to start a new business. But it does require you to not just focus on, great, we've created another frozen pancake. It's got to be something that connects more deeply with people. And you've got to basically forget the physical store as the place to engage consumers. If you're not winning.
And earning their loyalty. So that they buy your frozen pancake every other week.
Yes.
And then when you launch something else, they're like, that was really good. I'm gonna follow along on their journey, and I'm gonna try something I've never heard of. Right?
You know, I was listening in this, you know, there's a great example what we're talking about. I did a bit of work with a major company in the United States that makes cereals, and I was dealing with the guy that owns the P&L relationship for a frozen breakfast item. And the guy's literally, he said, we are getting our ass handed to us by a company called Kodiak Cakes. Now, I'd never even heard of Kodiak Cakes, but I came across the story of the business on a podcast. And the guy said it took them 16 years to get to $1 million in sales. 16 years. And from that, I think they hit that in 2014. And between 2014 and today, they're $200 million in sales. And what's amazing is that they have entered a brutally competitive category, one that is well known and dominated. This particular company that I'm referring to spends $50 million a year on marketing. And their sales numbers are flatlined or in decline. And here comes this company selling what you would think is the same product, but it's not the same product. There's so many dimensions to it that is not the same product. It may look the same, but it is not the same. That has come in and is disrupting a company that has the ability to throw $50 million in marketing at it. And I just think, again, that is not just about getting on the shelf. That is about capturing imagination and having consumers go, loyalty, pushing stuff out of the way and finding a new space in their own cupboards to carry that product. Yeah. So my last question for you, Elspeth, is this. So what are give us a couple of examples of new products that you have come across that you are really excited by. And they better be this item? Really good.
Are you rolling your eyes at me?
No.
Look at this item. Boursin cheese. Okay. Who doesn't love Boursin cheese? I love Boursin cheese. Everyone should. They come up with like minis. And they're amazing. I saw this. I was like, really? Really? This is your innovation? I love the package. I had to buy it. I love it. And now I'm all about it. I'm all about the Boursin minis. What else have I got here?
Do you know what? If I can just add to that, I remember working with Quaker Oats. And one of the things that was being done at the time is they were conducting all these ethnographies in the US. And what came out of these 200 ethnographies where you're in the home of the consumers, they said all the advertising at the time was showing all these happy families sitting around the table having breakfast together. In 200 family visits, not one family ate together. And one of the insights that came out of it was the kind of grab and go idea of breakfast, you know, whether you're eating it in the car, eating it on a bus, or eating it at your desk at work. So those Boursin minis makes a lot of sense. You can take it to work and in a moment create a little moment for yourself.
I love this.
It's just like being at home.
Can you see it? It's Diaspora. Maybe I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. It's the Diaspora Spice Company. This is really cool. This is kind of like some of the things that we spoke about, like, you know, doing something a little bit different. So this is a single origin turmeric. And it probably costs like 100 times whatever I pay for turmeric in the grocery store. And you can only buy it online. But the woman who started this company is so compelling about her search for the best whatever spices. She started with turmeric, as far as I know, and then has gone on. I've bought all of her other spices, and they're amazing. But she takes you on this journey. So she took something that I've been cooking with forever. I thought was perfectly acceptable, and then teaches me something new about a different variety and how important it is to choose the right variety and harvest it at the right time. And she's got all these great stories about the people that she works with in terms of, you know, offering a fair wage. And like, I'm sold. It costs like way more. I think it's way better. And this is not anything that's totally wild and wacky. It's something I was familiar with, but a little bit different. And I think I love stories like this when people can take something quite simple and really make a go of it. And then my last one.
Well, I mean, they're now a bit of an old news story at this point, but Fever Tree. I remember Fever Tree when they came out. They had gone on this wild search to find quinine, and they found it, and just their whole story. And of course, then they went. Do you know that the majority of your gin and tonic is made of tonic?
Yeah, these like simple, and that's a great example of a simple twist on something that's familiar to consumers. So is this one, Trader Joe's organic almond.
Yeah.
It's plant-based milk chocolate. So finding plant-based chocolate, it's quite easy because there's no, in dark chocolate, there's no milk products. But a milk chocolate using an almond beverage, I love chocolate. There's always chocolate in my office. There always has been. There always will be. And I love that they did a plant-based version of a milk chocolate. And you know what? We all need to be, reducing our reliance on conventional proteins and dairy sources. So it's a great little way to, have a plant-based option as a little treat. I love it. Delicious. Very, very, yeah.
And Trader Joe's, I listened to an amazing podcast about that company. I mean, I've read the book on Trader Joe's. I'm just fascinated by them. But this podcast, they basically don't do anything that normal grocery stores do. They don't advertise. They don't go on sale. They don't promote themselves. It's like, it is amazing again, it's just one of the mindset that exists in there.
Not to harp on about it, but they've got such credibility with their consumers that they could launch almost anything now. They could launch almost anything that, something completely unheard of because people have confidence. They can be like, well, I buy all these things from them and I love them all. I'm willing to take a risk and go with them on an adventure with something new. So, I think they're amazing. They're amazing at what they do.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Elspeth, it is always my grand pleasure to speak to you. So thank you for making time for us.
Pleasure. You take care, Robert. Bye.
Thanks. Take care. Bye. Thanks so much for sticking to the end of our two-part interview with Elspeth Copeland, founder of EC Consulting. I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I did. We're able to get some ideas for your food product and how to get it on store shelves. Once again, I'd like to give a big shout out to my major sponsor, the Innovation Hub at Carleton University, who's creating leaders just like Elspeth. If you'd like to find out more about what they're up to, visit www.carleton.ca/Innovation Hub. And remember, if you like what you see here, please click like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next interview.